Hello, and thank you again for joining us at KCBC. This is our second discipleship series, and we're going to be looking at the big story. So behind creation, why we were created, and what our purpose is. Hey, Allan, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, Rochelle. How you doing?
I'm doing well.
Yeah, it's good to be here. So what then? So this is the first talk, right? Of the second series that we're doing.
That's right.
Then what is the topic of today?
So the topic of today is, what is the purpose of creation? Why are we created? Yeah. So I guess.
So then I have a question for you, if that's okay. Mm-hmm. So what is the purpose of creation then?
Yeah.
There's a creator. What is the purpose of it?
That's good. That's a really good question. And I think for us as Christians, we need, before we even touch on the purpose of creation, we got to kind of touch on who the Christian God is, who we believe him to be. So just very briefly, I'd first just say that God is pre-existent, which means that his existence isn't contingent on anything or anyone. He doesn't depend on anything or anyone for his existence. He's always existed. But everything else depends upon God for their existence. We depend on God for our existence. He is the creator. Another thing I'd have to point out as well is that our God, the God of the Bible, did not create creation or mankind out of a need to be loved, a need for relationships. He has no lack. There is no lack within him. The biblical God, we believe in the triune, a trinity. So one God in essence, and three persons who exist co-eternally in a loving relationship. So God didn't create us out of a need to be loved, out of a need to be worshipped, out of a need or of any lack. He created us actually out of an outflowing of who he is. He is love. He creates. And that is why we were created. That is why all creation exists, ultimately for God's glory. It declares who he is. It declares his goodness. It declares his love, his righteousness. That is what creation was created for. That is what mankind, we were created for, to glorify God, aspects of who he is to one another, to reflect him to a certain extent, because obviously we're not God. We're made in his image to able to reflect certain aspects of who he is, but we aren't God. So there's certain things we can't do. So that's really nice. So that's why we're created, to glorify God and to.
Is it okay if I have some coffee as well whilst we talk?
Of course, go ahead.
That's good.
But I guess then that goes on to the question, when we look at the creation narrative, we see after God's created this repetition of a phrase where it says, God said this was good. So what does that mean, Allan? How would you explain to somebody that God saying it is good? What does that mean?
That's a good question. It's like you can see God's goodness in creation. Like it wasn't only a statement that we see in the creation narrative, but you can see the goodness of God in creation. You can see the essence of who God is, as you said, you pointed out brilliantly. We can see that in nature. We can see that in the complexity of the human body. You can see the complexity in a flower. You can see God's goodness in creation. And it's interesting because this also is an evidence of the existence of God. It's singing through all the things that have been made. Like, Romans 1:20 says that for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. So another text from the Bible says that the heavens, the creation declares the glory of God. And that's really nice because we can see who God is through his creation. And also we, as you said, you pointed out really brilliantly in terms of relationship. Like we were created out of his essence, out of who he is, out of love. for relationship with him. So he created us in his image. So we
Mm.
are image bearers. So we have the image of God inside of us.
Yes.
And then what does that mean? It means that we were created to glorify God, as you said.
Mm.
So
I think that's really good. I think that's something that I missed as well in regards to being created for relationship too. So I'm glad that you pointed that out, that we're created to be in a relationship with God, to be in a relationship with one another, and to reflect that community of the Godhead. In
yeah,
essence.
it was nice. Even in Genesis, it says that Adam was to walk, with God at the cool
Mm.
of the day. How
Yeah.
beautiful is that? Like we were created for this sort of relationship.
Exactly. Exactly. I've got a song coming to mind now, but I can't. I think it's Maverick City Communion.
Oh, that's a good song.
Yeah, that's a good song. Really good
Yeah, it
song.
is.
I guess I'm going to throw another question at you, Alan, in regards to, because you touched on Adam and Eve, you touched on God creating them for his glory, but I guess that goes on to the topic of sexuality as
Yeah.
well. Not just sex itself, sex as well as, but also sexuality. You know, women, men, and their inherent value, I guess.
Yeah, that's good. I think it's a question that people perhaps ask is, what about sex? Is sex bad?
Mm.
Well, no, sex is good. God created sex, of course, and then there's pleasure in sex, of course, but sex is only complete and it's fulfilled, in all of, like, the goodness of that is within the covenant of marriage.
Mm.
There is a wholeness that is seen in sex and in a sexual relationship that is within marriage. How many stories I've heard of people that wanted just to have a sexual life, but out of marriage, and then were with the person that they loved, and then the person, "No, I love you so much," until they went to bed with
Mm.
them, and then they left. Why? Because there was no covenant, there was no commitment. They
Mm.
only wanted the pleasure, the moment pleasure, but not any love, any commitment, really. So God created that for us, but also there is, like, as you said, male and female, and the Bible says that a man shall leave his house and shall join his
Mm.
woman, his wife, and they're going to be one flesh, because there is it's a complementary sexes, right? So
Mm.
it's not one bigger than the other. No, there's no sexism. It's like we're against that. But we
Yes.
believe that there is a complement. It's complementary, isn't it? We
Mm.
need each other. So we value equality in a sense of, like, the dignity of man and woman as well.
Yeah,
That's very important.
that's really
Anything that you
good.
want to add to that?
I mean, I think you kind of summed it up as well in regards to that. And I kept having a quote come into my mind by Sam Albury, where he was talking about marriage and he was talking about singleness, celibacy. And he was saying that the gospel, celibacy declares the sufficiency of the gospel, and marriage is merely a foretaste of, when you say marriage and sex, basically is within the covenant of marriage, is merely a foretaste of heaven. It's an appetizer. It's not the be all. And I just loved how he put that. So when you was just talking about the covenant and sex within that setting, it just made me think of that statement.
You
Yeah.
reminded me of a nice quote as well by Peter Scazzero on Emotionally Healthy Leader. He talks about singleness being like the breadth of the gospel, like the extent, how far you can get. Because as a single person, you're just free to go and
Yeah.
adventure in that sense. But the marriage, that marriage is like the depth of the gospel, and you can see the beauty of Christ and his church. So
Yeah.
very nice.
That's a really good quote, actually. I like that one. I guess I feel like I'm just firing questions at you, Alan, but
Man,
come
I
on.
got one question for you in the end as well.
Okay. Oh, all right. That makes me feel better. So what is our role then in creation?
That's good. As we said, like in the beginning, like relationship, of course, but we have to keep and care for the earth, right?
Mm,
God created the earth for us to take care of it, for us to steward. So we see the importance of ecology. We see, I think, nowadays, especially the Gen Z, they are very into taking care of the planet,
mm,
global warming, recycling, sustainability, and those things are really important. We don't want to overlook those things.
mm,
So we actually should get involved in those things to show the world and for us as well, not
mm.
to overlook, but to get involved because this is God's creation. We want to
Yeah.
take care of it. There's also the aspect of the potentiality of creation. So like creativity, I know you're like an artist, like as a musician, me too. Like,
Yeah.
we've got in at KCBC painters and actors and
Mhm.
all of that, but also people that are teaching, people that are good at admin,
Yeah.
people that are involved in politics. So
Mhm.
these are all important, and I consider those things creative. I don't think creators is only those that are into music or painting or whatever. I think everyone is created. We have this DNA that God, when He created us, we have this desire, this eager to create. And I
Mm.
really like the verse from Ephesians 2:10 that says, "For we are God's handiwork,"
Yeah.
or masterpiece, as some
Mm.
version say that. So, for we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. It's basically like, well, I created you to co-create with me. So God invites us to
Mhm.
join Him in creation, and that's beautiful. But now I
Mhm.
have a question for you, Rochelle. There
Okay.
you go. We got to that point,
Yeah.
which is perhaps maybe one of the most important ones because
Mhm.
application. How can we apply all of that we talked about to our
Yeah.
lives?
I think it starts at the beginning where I did with where I said God. It starts with a relationship with
Mm,
God. It starts with coming to God, and the only way in that which we can do that is through Jesus Christ. That we
mm,
can mend that broken relationship between man and their creator. And I think once we begin to walk alongside God, we begin to fulfill that mandate that was given to Adam and Eve in the beginning, but also in a spiritual sense as well,
mm,
where God says, I've given you authority over all these things, to tend and oversee. And I think when we draw close to God in our relationship, we begin to view the world and people as God does.
mm,
And we begin, the second command, love the Lord your first command, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself.
mm,
So it's first relationship with God, drawing closer to God, being transformed by the renewing of our mind. And then secondly, that outworking should be to love our neighbors,
mm,
cultivating relationships with one another, and not, shallow relationships, but relationships where you actually seek out the best for one
mm,
another, probably even more so than yourself. We want to be outdoing each other in good deeds.
mm,
We want to be intentional. We want to cultivate communities that we can invite other people into as well, not just cliques. I think the third thing would be then in that community together. I'm not saying that you can't do it individually as well. Begin to tend and take care and be conscious and mindful of the way in which we deal with our surroundings, the earth, I guess you could say, and
mm,
being appreciative of it. I think we can be very just blasé, don't really care, we don't really think about where our food comes from or any of those things.
mm,
It's just there. You just go into, wherever you want to go into, Marks or whatnot, and you just get it. But you don't think about how it got here and all of those things. We're
mm,
just very
mm,
consumeristic. But I think it's being just mindful, conscious, and seeking ways in which we can help better take care of where we live, I guess.
That's really good.
Yeah, I guess that would be those 3 points.
Yeah. Oh, Rochelle, it was really nice to have this chat. I learned a lot with what you said, so thank you.
Thank you.
And yeah, guys, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
We're going to also have a testimony, and please do watch the next videos as well. Rochelle.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Bless you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello, KCBC. I'm Natalia. I'm a biologist and I currently work with cancer research as a scientist, but I'm doing my PhD now. It's funny because growing up, I never really envisioned myself as a scientist. However, I was always fascinated with nature and life and really all living things, organisms, systems, and this sort of stuff. So, of course, when the time came, I picked biology as a major, and I followed on that course. That's how I became a scientist, let's say. And it's interesting because I joined these studies as a Christian, thinking that I wanted to learn more about God by learning more about the creation. And in fact, that happened. I do feel like I know a lot more by observing nature, but it's interesting because science has also changed the way I think about lots of things. You see, growing into a scientist, let's say, and keeping my faith was not very easy. Really not easy at all. You see, science is all about asking questions and the facts. You know, you ask a question, you observe nature, you ask a question, you test it, you get the facts, then you write it down and you say, okay, so this is how it happens, or this is why it happens. And of course, it depends on your question. But it's interesting because you really learn this way of thinking, you know, I need the facts and I need the numbers, and, you know, you always look into the data. You learn to be very critical and to be very, very inquisitive. And of course, I was going to bring that into my faith too, right? This is a way of thinking that we learn. And of course, this is who I am now. And I've gone through many cycles of just reassessing my faith and thinking, okay, what do I believe in? Why do I believe in that? How does that make sense? Or does it make sense? Does it not make sense? How do I move forward? How do I live with that? And it hasn't always been easy, but I've learned a couple of things, and I remained a Christian throughout all these. So I will share a couple of the things I learned with you guys. The first thing I've learned is that science does not disprove God, nor is science an enemy of God, nor is faith an enemy of science. So it is possible to be a scientist and to believe in God and to keep your faith and all of these things. But there is a point where faith is faith. And, sorry, I have a cat, as you might have noticed. Faith is faith. Knowledge will only carry you so far, and we will not have all the answers to all the questions we ask. But we should take comfort in knowing that blessed are those who did not see but believed. And I believe we're those. And I believe God is very happy when he sees how we remain, faithful, how our hearts really preserve our faith. And I'm sure it's him giving us, enough to carry on growing in our faith. I know that's also not coming from us, but I'm sure it brings him joy. The other thing I learned that's very important is that it's more than okay to ask questions. So God has made us the way we are. He gave us a brain and curiosity, and it's not a bad thing to criticize your own faith and to reassess what you believe in. It's not a bad thing to ask questions. And if you go to the Bible, you see many examples of men who they just, they'll ask God, why is this happening? How is this happening? And sometimes they'll even accuse God, hey, you're being unjust, or this is unfair. And it's amazing to see how God responds to these people, because he's always so kind and loving, and he's just really awesome. And I'm sure that he looks at us with the same eyes, because he's the very same God who hasn't changed. And the last thing I learned is that we can be at peace even though we don't have all the answers. And that's actually very counterintuitive for me. And I find it amazing. And I think that's really a gift from God. That I can find peace, and I don't have all the answers. Things don't always make sense. And sometimes I'm like, what's happening now? And that's okay. And I'm okay with that. And you can be too. So God bless you. Bye.